Okay, we can start. Can you tell me for the beginning, how is it possible that WHO is still claiming that there was the change of definition of pandemics just before it was declared, when there are some evidence it was changed?
Okay, there is a normal work of WHO is to set up standards, and as we evolve, we've modified standards to make sure they are more accurate and more proper. In this case of the definition, we don't have actually a specific definition for pandemic, but we have definition for the different phases of the pandemic. That was done with a work which came before, in fact, the pandemic itself, the H1N1 in 2009. And that was 2 years of effort of roughly 42, I think, experts who work on it from different perspectives to make sure we review the guidance. And one of the issues came about severity, because severity is a little bit subjective. Some countries understand severity differently from others. It depends on your culture, how important it is that some people die or don't die, or severe and severe, depending on the public health system, that can absorb or not absorb the extra work. So the severity element was a challenge and technically a problem for the overall coordinations. That was independently of the emergence of the pandemic, but in preparation of a pandemic, because at that time, if you remember, we had the H5N1 avian influenza. Yes. And we were already concerned about a severe pandemic that could emerge from this avian virus that could then transmit person to person efficiently. So this issue of severity was actually discussed and perceived not to be objective. So what was objective was the epidemiology of the disease. The disease is there or is not, or in another place, I mean, how the disease spread, and of course the type of virus. So that was independent, it was linked to the preparedness for a pandemic, but we didn't know H1N1 was going to come and the severity issues were going to be an issue. Technically, the phase 6 that we discussed, the phase 6 means international spread of disease in more than 3 regions, and we stick to that.
But so, the criteria were changed for the phase 6.
Well, that was just what you have to realize.
Criteria are the part of the definition.
No, you have to realize it was...
The dictionary says so.
The work was done for 2 years. It was actually finished in February 2009 and then published in May. Okay, but that was already in the pipeline.
Okay. But the pandemics would not be declared if it stayed in the phase 6. The pandemics is...
The pandemic is not the key issue.
If it...
the key issue is public health emergency. We wanted to make sure we can declare a public health emergency of international concern, that is according to the international health regulation, to make sure governments are prepared. Okay, because we need globally, in terms of coordination, and for the industry and for everybody to be prepared to produce vaccine, for instance, or to access a stockpile of, in that case, antivirals like the So the key decisions from the Director General was the first one was to declare a public health emergency of international concern. And that was done in April, as we follow up the event in Mexico. We follow up the laboratory data actually provided by the US, that we were for sure dealing with a new virus in humans, and dealing with a virus that really looked to be severe if we took a look at the data at that time from intensive care unit in Mexico. So based on that and the fact that the virus was obviously spreading as we were looking at it, the Director General decided, rightly so in my view, to clearly say, alert the world, we have a new influenza virus, which seems to be severe at that time, for various reasons. It was relatively looked severe in Mexico. We didn't have time to have the denominators, people who are infected but not sick in the population. That takes time to collect. So we were very concerned. And I think if we had to do it tomorrow, we do it the very same way. We will alert the world that yes...
Would you have the criteria of severity in the future?
Well, the criteria of severity is under review because we're looking at it how to handle it. Again, we realize it's a subjective element. Some countries will say this particular disease, I don't see it as very severe. Others will say, I see it as very severe. There are different cultures in the world. I mean, going from in this region...
Yes, I understand the issue. I do, really. Okay. But if it turns out that less people died from swine flu than they died from seasonal flu.
That you know that today.
Are the money that we spent, was the money that we spent justified? I mean, was it justified?
That's the price to pay for safety, in a way. If you call a fire brigade, okay, you don't complain they bring a big truck. Okay, you just say they bring a truck to deal with my problems. And if the problem is a small fire, you're lucky. We had the very same issues. WHO was prepared for the worst, and it was important, government, and again at that time, the disease we still have today, because we just have a report yesterday from Indonesia of a 29-year-old woman who died of avian influenza. Avian influenza killed one out of 3 persons, roughly.
Yes, I know.
Okay? Well, you know it, but it's important to take that into account.
No,
because
I know that.
that was a key.
We're talking about the swine flu.
No. But it's important because the whole preparedness was triggered by the concern of a severe disease. It's very lucky. Look at the previous pandemic we had in 1968, in 1957, in 1918. If you have been at that time in charge of being prepared, you will say, well, I've just prepared lightly. No, you will have taken seriously. And WHO and government took it seriously. There is some stock of vaccine that has not been used, stock of oseltamivir that has not been used. So what?
But the Feinberg Committee said,
True.
You say, the Feinberg Committee said, you say it's relevant report.
Yeah.
The Feinberg Committee said that the criteria has been changed and that there was not clear enough definition, if I understood it correctly.
There is no definition, in fact, of what formally what a pandemic is. There is definition of the different phases.
There were some criteria on the website of WHO.
And there were different scenarios that was actually envisaged at that time. And that created confusions.
Why is it so difficult
and Feinberg,
No,
we fully admit it wasn't changed. We fully admit that at that time we have scenarios which were which were looked at that created confusions. And it also created confusion because this committee that met for 2 years to look at revised guidance ended up with conclusions just before H1N1. So some countries were not in the same phase definition in mind. And that's true because we had conversation with government and we need to explain. So there was some confusion. I think the WHO completely agree with that. We also agree that severity needs to be reviewed, assessed. It's an important element for government, for the public, etc. At the same time, we cannot in advance know the severity of a pandemic.
So you don't admit that the definition was changed?
You can look at it, definition talking about the phases. What we changed was the definition of phases. And particularly...
Just before the declaration of pandemics?
Well, that's just a chronology of events, but it has nothing to do with the pandemic because it was already in the book before the pandemic emerged. Okay, it was already in...
In 2007, you had the description of phase 6 as we know it today. Is that what you...
That's when the process...
We changed it, but my point in this meeting, this group met for 2 years. It didn't, the problem you see and the confusion came...
You want to say it was a process, but we finished the process just before the pandemic was declared.
That's correct.
So the definition was changed just before.
It's not the definition of pandemic, it's the definition of the phases.
Okay,
it's
don't you think the phase 6 is pandemic?
Phase 6 is what we call the pandemic. We declare a pandemic.
I don't understand.
No, okay. Phase 6, you have to understand the different phases. We have a virus that emerged, a new virus that emerged in poultry or in birds.
I know that,
okay?
but phase 6 is pandemic.
Phase 6 means, but phase 6 means in practice, and that was because you have this different phase of a pandemic. But the phase 6 has created problem, and that's what you hear today, because there was this link with industry, the vaccine producer. We're waiting for phase 6 to start the vaccines. And that was extremely important, that they have actually a commitment to start switching for seasonal vaccine to develop, for instance, the pandemic vaccine. The challenge we had at that time was to have, in a very short period of time, a huge size of vaccines to be delivered, even without knowing if it was going to be very, very severe or not very severe. So that was a challenge.
In the future, you will insist that the severity criteria is in the criteria for phase 6.
The problem with the severity is the fact that we, and again government, and at that time, because of the concern of H5N1, we were all looking to be prepared for the worst. The worst did not happen. We made, in a way, a mistake, or many of us made this mistake, to continue to roll the plan, okay, and not maybe to adapt earlier. That's Feinberg's conclusions too. And it's very true, we need to be in a position to have a plan because of uncertainty, that not just prepare for the worst, but maybe more flexible to adapt to a less severe event.
Yeah, I understand that. The Feinberg Committee also said that the mechanisms of control when it comes to conflict of interest should be improved. Has it been improved since the Feinberg Committee was
Yeah, it has certainly
adopted?
It was already in place, to be honest, before. What has improved? No.
Yeah.
Well, the improvement has come by more transparency. I mean, now you can go to the website and you will find the name of everyone. Now, virtually all committees, the list of the members are on the WHO website. And for instance, if you go to this emergency committee, you will see a summary of their declared interest. It's not a conflict of interest. They work, like you work with, I believe, with the media, private media of the press industry. We work with industry developing diagnostic tests, developing drugs, developing vaccines. That's just normal business. WHO is aware of potential conflict of interest. That's why you have these declarations. This is reviewed by the legal office and by the Director General. And from time to time, we say, no, we don't take a particular expert because we are concerned. Okay, we're not naive at all. We know these problems may exist, but there are safeguards which are put in place. And today, what was internal WHO process is transparent, is publicly available
so
on the
website. So always in the future you will transparently publish.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you say, because this emergency committee, for instance, was set up to improve transparency. Because in the old days, if you remember SARS, I don't know if you remember SARS, some countries complained that it was only the secretariat alone that make decisions. So that's why we had this emergency committee, which actually is an independent body outside of WHO that provide advice to the Director General, not just me, the Secretariat, I mean, not just the technical staff within the organization. That was exactly made to make sure WHO is not, is more transparent and is not driven internally.
So you're claiming WHO was not misused by pharmaceutical companies when it comes to swine flu?
But if you have any element that tell me the contrary, I'll be open to look at them. We went,
facts.
As I said.
Don't you have doubts?
No.
We have the same facts.
But the fact have not changed since.
I can't trace.
Okay.
I can't trace money. You know?
I don't want to interview you, but the fact is,
Sorry.
the fact have not changed for the last 2 years. Okay, unless you tell me there's been a change. To my knowledge, they have not changed. And with the fact we have, there have been a number of committees. I can tell you, the Director General, many senior officials went through many reviews to explain what happened. I mentioned before an hearing to the European Parliament. I mentioned the review committee with Dr. Feinberg. There have been many reviews, and the work is done. I'm not going to reopen the file unless you bring some new elements, and I don't see new elements.
It's interesting. I have to say this and ask you, how is it possible? Feinberg committee says that it's very strange that there were declarations of interest when it comes to emergency committee, and it was strange that no one was actually excluded based on those. Because
as you rightly say, it's a declaration of interest. It's not a declaration of conflict.
Yeah, well,
having an interest.
Declaration of interest is the basis to.
It's the basis for a judgment to believe that there is a conflict or not. Yeah, depending of the relationship of the person with the industry or with the vaccine manufacturer in that case. But that's normal. That's something we do normally. It doesn't mean you have an interest. And again, to have the right expert to understand the vaccine productions, they need to come from need to be someone who understands, works with vaccine manufacturers. Otherwise, they're not experts.
All right. Just one more question.
Yeah.
Here, people are reacting very strange on the fact that we were starting to ask questions about the role of WHO. So, do you think it's legitimate for journalists to just ask the questions? It's
completely legitimate. All questions are legitimate. Suspicions or accusation is not legitimate unless you have a new fact to bring into the discussions. But questions, please, this type of questions are completely legitimate, and I came here also if I can help you to explain and understand what, a number of issues that you may have raised that were not understood.
Issues, as you can see.
But no, they deserve more explanations. And again, I'm very pleased to explain.
But we do have some facts that.
But
we have some facts and raised doubts. The European Parliament Committee raised facts, made report. They said.
But that's true. That was all legitimate, but that has been already examined.
Yeah.
So
nothing has been done.
What do you mean nothing has been done? There are conclusions. If nothing has been done, that means WHO was not found having some influence by the industry.
Okay, don't you think that there should be some serious investigation?
It's done.
Within
But it has been done. That's why you seem
by
not to
review
understand.
committee?
The review committee has done it with I think 25 or so
That's
experts.
enough, you think?
Well, that was the official process, and in addition to that, there have been many, hearings to Parliament, and many governments have been asked to explain why some vaccine has been bought and then destroyed at the end. But again, I can take plenty of analogy. If you buy fire extinguisher for these buildings, you don't use them, nobody's complaining. Are you going to complain if you don't use fire extinguishers? You buy even new ones next year. So it's a price to pay for being on the safe side, in a way, vis-à-vis a risk that comes in. And one of the dangers today, actually, following all these events, and the fact that it was mine, we were lucky, is the fact that we may now be unprepared for a very severe one that may come one day. Okay, because it's not over. Pandemic occur from time to time, not severe, mild, more severe. We need to be prepared, and there is a cost to pay for preparedness. That's the whole thing I can say. Security has a cost.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a couple of more questions for you, really, 2 questions, no more. I could talk to you, obviously, for a long time, because...
I need to get rid of that.
Maybe I can suggest if you have a list of questions, and even when they are away, we
You're
can
welcome.
send them, the questions, when if you can write us specific questions,
Yeah, of course.
and
Yeah, that would be
we can
great.
deliver it to the experts.
Yeah, it would be great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Ispremite samo da
Should I disappear?
Has
I
it-
don't want
I don't know why I was sitting here, to be
No,
honest.
it will be
Just to put the
more
mic.
serious. Even more serious.
Maybe to explain about the formal recommendation?
Oh yeah, if you wish, just to, I was told.
But that was questioned by Politica. The question was by Politica.
No, but what was, I don't know, you have some information that you really...
But there was a question by Politica, you
Yeah.
remember, about what the numbers of vaccination that were procured here. So it just matter, just to make sure
No,
that
but it was just recommendations of authorities.
Yeah, it was a formula and not
formula,
that country has to apply. We cannot do that.
Someone asked, said that you. Okay,
We can...
We provided a
discuss this
formula,
more
which is
later.
correct.
Okay. Just, I want to ask you first, we couldn't get the answer to this question. How could WHO recommend vaccination for the pregnant woman if it wasn't tested on the pregnant woman? I'm talking about the swine flu vaccine with adjuvants.
Unless a product is specifically designed for pregnant women population, it's not going to have a clinical trial prior to the licensing. In this case, the vaccine is recommended because there is a need to protect the mother and the child. It's a part of the normal adult population. If you would go and now decide that you need a clinical trial, you will get your results in a couple of years, which means you did not protect your population. The severity of the disease in pregnant women was high. They were 10 times more likely to require intensive care treatment, particularly in their 2nd and 3rd trimester, and also up to 2 weeks post-delivery. That's the rationale to recommend the vaccine. It's a balance between the risk of the disease and the possible risks of immunization.
Okay, but still, wasn't the risk too big? Since
No.
the vaccine was not tested and it was actually produced much faster than the regular vaccines for the seasonal flu.
No,
I mean,
it was
that's the reason
produced.
We had adjuvants, isn't it?
That's wrong.
Okay.
The production of the vaccine takes its time.
Okay.
You can't make it quicker. The only thing that you can do is to have the administrative part linked to its release modified.
But please, if the vaccine didn't have adjuvants, was it possible to have that number of vaccines so fast without the adjuvants? Wasn't the
don't
point of
understand your
adjuvants-
question.
Maybe I don't understand. Wasn't the purpose of adjuvants to make more vaccine on the smaller part, out of the smaller part of antigen? Did
To
you apply-
use less antigen per dose, yes.
Okay. But
That's
then
correct.
The key time is to produce antigen. It takes time.
The time involvement is the same, whether the vaccine is adjuvanted or non-adjuvanted. So in terms of times required to produce a dose of vaccine, it would be just the same.
So it's the same time for unadjuvant.
But you need-
Without adjuvant, we could, let me say it like this, I'm sorry, maybe my English is not that great. If we have 1 million doses of vaccines, the same terms, per 1 month, how many vaccines with adjuvant?
3 million,
So,
because you are formulating with less adjuvant.
Less antigen.
Sorry, less antigen.
antigen, yeah. So it was
Yeah.
produced much quicker.
No, you obtain more doses in the same amount of time.
But you booster the antigen, the one part of antigen, you make the booster effect with adjuvant. Isn't that true?
You are now
I'm sorry.
mixing two things. One is the vaccine production, and one is what it does to an individual that
I
receives.
understand what you're saying, but don't you think, I think it was produced in 2 months.
Well, the production usually takes 3 months, whether it's a seasonal one, whether it's a pandemic one, if you are lucky, and the production runs adequately.
And it was produced in 2 months.
Yeah, but that's not the development.
I don't think that's true.
Maybe it's my fault. Okay, I'll take your word for it. But the more of vaccines could be produced with adjuvants.
In the
and
same
less-
amount of time. In the
Okay.
same amount of time.
Okay. And you're claiming that it was properly tested, just as the seasonal flu vaccine is tested.
The lot release requirements have been fully followed. The lot release requirements by the manufacturer as well as by the regulatory authority of the country of production have been fully observed.
But there was a case of pandemics. It was limited for use.
I think
the
what you
license was
that's correct.
declared.
I think what you're trying to raise that the regulatory authorities had to shorten the expiry dates on certain lots of influenza vaccine. And this has to do with the observation that the antigen was found to be very unstable. It's an observation that we have not made with seasonal influenza vaccines. It's also confirming that the regulatory authorities and manufacturers are taking the quality as an important element and are adjusting the utilization information as the information is generated.
Okay, which institution in the world or in the national countries, governments, can take responsibility for the safety of vaccine against the swine flu?
The safety is, or the knowledge about the safety is based on the clinical trials which have been done, and they are supplemented with the information of its use post-licensure. The clinical trials traditionally are sized to be between a couple of thousands to a couple of tens of thousands. And that information will give you the frequencies of events which occur in that group. Once you start using it in millions of doses, you may still find a very rare event that by the virtue of a clinical trial you would not have been able to pick up.
Who can get out and stand and say, we're taking responsibility, this was
Nobody
safe?
will, and nobody does. I don't think that you will find such an example. That might be a wish, but this example doesn't exist. There is
Why
nobody.
do you claim that it was completely safe to recommend?
There was no
WHO.
claim that it was 100% safe. It's safe. It's safe in a terms of frequent events, common events, rare events, but in terms of something happening very rarely, you simply have to use the doses before you actually generate this information. You cannot know this upfront. And therefore, you cannot take blame or responsibility for something you don't know about.
So
This
it
is-
happens that some man got sick from, if some man got sick from getting a vaccine against swine flu, who can he sue?
Well, what you are raising right now is a temporal association. Somebody got ill after it received the vaccines. This, however, does not mean that it has been caused by the vaccine.
If it comes in future that it was proven he got sick by the vaccine.
The way
can
to
he
prove is that you will have more cases than one.
Okay, but if we have,
There are very clear methods of establishing the relationship between a vaccine and its ability to cause certain events.
So actually nobody takes responsibility.
The responsibility is taken on behalf of the regulatory authorities for monitoring the events. Once, excuse me,
That's not what I asked.
excuse me, let me finish. When a signal is identified, the regulatory authorities will act. That's their responsibility. And that's the answer to your question. Nobody is going to take the responsibility you are requiring. In terms of there is a someone that you can always sue for whatever happens in your life. You have to confirm that it has been in relationship, in causal relationship, in this case with the vaccine. Without it, I'm afraid you don't have the case.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the microphone is yours.